Hey there, friends in the neighborhood, Yinzers. WAP bringing you another episode of Yinzology, the study of everything Pittsburgh. Ladies and Yinzers, welcome to the main event for the title of heavyweight champion of food and gas convenience stores. And in this corner, we have, weighing in about 1,000 pounds, the family name where it was changed from an S to a Z for pizzazz and marketing genius, with a record of over 800 locations. The hometown west of the Appalachian Mountains, Sheetz. And in this corner, weighing in at about 1,000 pounds, with a record of close to over 1,000 locations, with a name that originates from the ancient Native American Ojibwe tribe, that translates more or less to wild goose, with the hometown east of the Appalachian Mountains, Wawas. Let's get ready to rumble. Now listen here, gentlemen and jags. You have received your instructions in the dressing room. I want a clean fight. Yins, hear me? Protect yourself at all times, but also obey my commands at all times. When I tell you to break for a hoagie or a schmegel or a schmuffin, I want a clean break. No blows in the pantsinette or below the belt. Keep it clean. Are there any questions? Touch your sandwiches. Go back to your corners. Let's fight. So Yinzers, as the summer winds down and the kids go back to school, somewhere along the way this summer, there's a good chance that you either stopped at a Sheetz, or you stopped at a Wawa's, or you stopped at both. But did you know that there is a heated debate between these two franchises as to who is the best, as to who is number one? So sit back, buckle up, as we get ready for a good 12 rounds. And if you have the strength, if you have the courage, if you have the guts to finish this video to the end, I will tell you who the number one champion, the heavyweight in food and gas convenience store industry is. I will let you know. Stay tuned. Let's get into this. It starts with being a Yinzologist, some intense R&D, research and development, going into the archives. I recommend this book, Made to Order Sheetz Story, Fresh Fruits Sheetz by Kenneth Womack. This is a great book. Then there's The Wawa Way, How a Funny Name and 6 Core Values Revolutionized the Convenience Store by Howard Stockwell. So the first thing that jumps out is that both of these chains, these family-owned convenience stores from Pennsylvania, they have unparalleled growth. They are always shaping and reshaping the retail culture. Sheetz just announced their grand opening of their 800th store down here in Raleigh, North Carolina, and they continue to grow up and down the East Coast. Both of these stores have stores up and down the East Coast, all right? And Sheetz also announced that they're finally opening their first ever Sheetz store within the Pittsburgh city limits. They're also talking about opening up 50 more stores in Ohio, 50 more stores in Michigan. All right, so listen, when you start to read and dive into these two companies, something jumps out right away, and it's really fascinating. And at the same time, it's really weird, all right? It's the similarities. All right, let's go over some of them, all right? Beginning with the history. All right. Now, the history of Wawa goes back to David C. Wood. He was into iron manufacturing and he owned land and operated the Greenwich Iron Works. And the Wood family business venture laid the foundation of Wawa's. And in 1890, they moved to Wawa, Pennsylvania, went into dairy. For some reason, they bought a 1,000-acre dairy farm and started making milk in the Philadelphia area. All right, Sheetz, the family Sheetz business, also started in the dairy industry. All right, that's really weird. They owned and operated a dairy business in Pennsylvania in Altoona. All right, and you've heard us mention Altoona before. Altoona is the place where it was back in the day, it was rocking. And the reason it was rocking and rolling was because of Pennsylvania Railroad. They had the historic horseshoe curve that was an engineering miracle to make this train curve into the mountainside. And so Altoona was rocking. They were pushing out milk, and they transitioned from milk processing into a modern convenience store with gas stations and buildings. And both of these companies started out on the groundwork of the dairy industry. We're talking milk and butter and ice cream and all that good stuff. Another similarity, strong presence in the mid-Atlantic states. Of course, PA, where they both started, Maryland, Virginia, and they got hundreds of stores between the two of them. All right, Wawa has, again, over 1,000. Sheetz is right behind them with like 800, okay? They're expanding left and right, north and south. Down here in the Carolinas. Wawa's all the way down in Florida, okay? That's where I'd never been to a Wawa's. It was only when we went on a little weekend vacation down here in Florida, I finally made it to a Wawa's, okay, to do this video. They're both very strategic in the way they position and buy real estate. Location is very important. And then they're very similar in their marketing, in the way throughout the years they have had to pivot and be flexible and be able to adapt and change with the times, knowing that if they didn't, they would die. So if you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, if you're thinking about going in business, but you don't have the money or the time to go to like university for business classes or a business degree, you're going to want to start with both of these books, all right? Because they lay the foundation of what it takes to be a businessman or woman, and they took risks, calculated risks, but in a way that was creative and very aggressive. And so they both have similar market strategies, the way they expand into new regions, a way they have adapted into AI and mobile apps. Sheetz started doing these pop-up rock concerts at their stores. They both have gotten into the world of charging up your Teslas and your electric cars. They got those EV stations. And then the food industry, all right? They're both competing at a level where they're not competing with other gas stations. No, my friend. They are competing with places like McDonald's and Wendy's and Dunkin' Donuts. Like, they are competing at that kind of level when it comes to, they want you, when you're coming to get gas and fill up, they want you to eat, all right? It's about the food. And it's very similar in the way they have attacked that revenue food service, offering menus that are customizable, the classic MTO, made to order. You can touch the screen and order how you like. And they also have similar sandwiches and breakfast items, quesadillas and appetizers. And they both have the touchscreen kiosks for ordering hot food, cold food, coffee, drinks. They both provide low gas fuel, all right? You go in there, you gas up, offering the loyalty program discounts, right? They both operate on a 24/7 convenience where you can stop in at any time. One-stop shop with the snacks, prepackaged food, get your coffee, cold beverages, your tobacco products. when you get the grumbles, when you get the munchies, all right? You know what I mean? You need a late night snack, you go to Sheetz or Wawa's. Then they're very similar in their customer-focused service, right? And it ties closely with their families. Both of these companies come from close-knit families that believed in the company focused on the people. So they both strive to have that excellent customer service for the people. Very similar. Comes back from that agricultural farming, looking out for one another, working the farm, coming together, working together to serve one another. And that has carried on throughout the years with both of these companies. So they prioritize in customer first approach, high satisfaction rankings with both of them, offering Apple Pay and Google Wallet, and all them streamlined services that you're looking for. And I tell you, it's crazy how similar they are. And I have this theory. If you were to take all the marketing and all the logos and remove them, and you take someone who's been to a Sheetz and been to a Wawa's, minus the food menu, you tell them to walk into the store, I don't think they could tell the difference. I don't think they could tell you whether or not it's a Wawa's or a Sheetz. Now, one reason why that might be, why they're set up very similar, is because they both started out in PA. So the Pennsylvania Liquor and Control Board has certain rules and regulations and laws that are in place, especially when you're selling alcohol, because they both have a cooler, walk-in coolers to get your beers. And they have to be set up and designed a certain way. Now, that may be one reason why they look alike. Another reason why is they just know the flow of getting the customer in and out. And they both have come up with the same concept. But you go into a store without any of the logos or marketing, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. That's how similar they are. Now, we'll dive into, yes, there are some pros and cons to both. We'll get into those. But before we do, I want to share some of the highlights because I did really get into this book. I didn't get into the Wawa book as much as I did this one. But there are some great stories in here, some highlights I want to share with you real quick before we get into the pros and cons of Sheetz and Wawa's. So real quick, like the birth of Sheetz begins with 19th century birth of James E. Harshbarger. They call him J.E. All right. Dutch-born ancestors immigrating to the United States in the early 1800s. Born January 7th, 1882. So then you have these central Pennsylvania dairy farmers. You have all this overflow of milk. Like you have more milk than you can sell. Like, what are you going to do with all this milk? That's when a light bulb went off for J.E. J.E. began his dairy operation, no joke, where do most entrepreneurs start? Out of their garage. All right, J.E. starts a shop in the large garage behind his home on Fifth Avenue. I think this is in Altoona, across from Adams Grade School. Now, mind you, this is back in the day where they did not have refrigeration to prevent spoilage. And so J.E. gets this ladle, all right? He has a ladle, and the ladle had a hook that would hang on the inside of a can. And he would dish out the milk, one can at a time. And in those pre-pasteurization days, a dairy distributor like J.E. would transport his product into the city from the dairy farm. So he's getting this overproduction of milk from the country, and he was finding a way to bring it into the city, into Altoona, every morning at 5 a.m. on a horse and buggy to the Altoona train station, right? because the trains were rocking in Altoona, where he would pick up 5-gallon cans of milk from the dairy farmers with nearly a dozen cans in his buggy. And he made his way, knocking and talking. Hello, milkman. And local housewives would emerge from their homes with their pans, into which J.E. would scoop out milk at 2 cents per ladle. Be like, hey, give me a ladle and a half. All right, here's 3 cents. I'm not joking. That's just crazy. Now, around 11 a.m., his buggy would be empty. He would go back to the train station for a second batch of milk for distribution. Fifth Avenue Dairy's business grew. J.E. quickly expanded his route, and they purchased yet another horse and buggy to establish additional routes across the city. It's amazing. I have a tiny garage, a couple cans, and a ladle and some milk. The Harshbarger Dairy Company was born. Then eventually, you move from horse and buggy. Now you're moving from horses to trucks. Ends up with 6 flatbed trucks in the morning with the auto transportation taking over, right? And then you've got increased productivity in those, mind you, pre-regulation days. So you could pretty much do what you wanted before there were regulations. You're selling milk from a horse. Yeah. You didn't have to keep everything refrigerated and iced and all of that jazz. Now, J.E. and Jenny had a son. His name was Jim, and he earned a degree in dairy from Penn State University. A lot of the Sheetz members ended up going to Penn State, so if you're a Penn State fan, they went to Penn State to learn business, all right? And then the second youngest of 11 children, Jerry was the son of James Sheetz. That's where we get the Sheetz name, and it was spelled with an S, and they changed it to a Z. That's a whole nother story at a convention that he went to. Jerry's father later died of lung disease from shoveling coal his whole life to keep the steam engines running. What's nice about the Sheetz family back in the day, they all had to go to church, but then after church, the family would take groceries and dairy goods to widows and shut-ins and other less fortunate people around the city. Jerry and Kathleen ingrained this sense of charity into their children, all right? Jerry would learn about various people in need, and he would take it upon himself. And at the dairy, they would gather quarts of eggnog and ice cream to share with folks at Christmas time. I mean, that's where this customer service comes from, and they carried that tradition throughout the years. Now, J.E. Harshbarger had become the largest dairy outfit between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. And he got the supermarket giant. I don't know if you older users remember A&P entered into an exclusive contract with the dairy family. And A&P enjoyed strong sales in Altoona and the surrounding area. But here's the thing, it was all about home delivery. Remember, you had these metal boxes outside on your porch, and the milkman would come and dump the products into the milk box. And that home delivery slowly but surely kind of faded away when the A&P markets, the grocers came in, right? Everything changed, right? And so they had to think about creative ways to make sales and increase sales with the supermarkets. The supermarkets were extending their hours. And here's the thing you want to remember, that supermarkets were not open on Sundays because Pennsylvania used to have what were called blue laws. All right, older yinzers remember the blue laws. I was born in 1972, and I remember as a kid, Shop and Save would not be open because of blue laws. But it was the early 70s that the laws started to go away. And these laws were passed in 1794 at the height of the state's Quaker influence and designed to enforce religious standards. The Commonwealth's blue laws prohibited prohibited the operation of retail stores, including grocery stores, on Sundays. The laws were considered to be a secular virtue because they protected Sunday as a designated day for rest and preserving family unity. All right. By the 1970s, blue laws would slowly begin to fade away across the United States. So Jerry decides to open up a dairy store of his own. And he's like, we got to build some of our own outlets. All right. We can't just have the dairy farm and the trucks. We got to have our own store. So he wanted to open up his own store. So Bob Sheetz comes along, right? He's the son of Jerry. And Bob had big plans for the Sheetz dairy store. All right. This is where things start to really take off. He wanted to focus on the store and supplement it with a range of deli and grocery and convenience items. Now, around this time in 1927, if you remember the Southland Ice Company, this company later grew into the behemoth that we now know as 7-Eleven, all right, opened its storefront in Dallas, Texas. And John Jefferson Green was an employee of Southland Ice Company, began selling milk and eggs and bread in one of the company's ice houses, drawing upon the ice plant's cooling facilities to preserve his product's freshness. Now, the Great Depression comes along and forced the company into bankruptcy, but the Southland Corporation enjoyed a retail boom during the post-war years, branded as 7-Eleven. Convenience store's hours of operation 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., which was crazy back then to think a store would be open for that amount of time. And so when Bob purchased the Sheetz dairy store from his dad, 7-Eleven had opened 100 locations. In 1962, 7-Eleven opened its first 24-hour location in Austin, Texas, offering dairy items, bread, soft drinks, eggs, coffee, candy products, donuts, canned goods, newspapers. In 1966, the convenience store industry notched $1 billion in sales for the first time. Now, this is where Bob wants to change everything, and he wants to focus in on selling as much items as he can. And he starts out with none other than chip chopped ham. Now, this ain't chipped ham from Isley's. All right. This is chipped ham, but it's from Iowa. And the ham arrived in 8-pound cans. And the contents had to be processed through a gravity-fed meat slicer. On a good Sunday, Bob points out, I could sell 10 cases of that chip-chopped ham, 480 pounds. We could sell on Sunday. Many times I sold at cost. I just wanted the traffic. He's just bringing people into the store. And he's doing this by selling the chip-chopped ham at cost. Now, he could get away with selling this on Sunday because he wasn't technically a full-on grocer. He wasn't considered a grocer, supermarket. He was a small family mom and pop dairy store, right? So he could get away with, he kind of found a way around the blue laws, okay? So that's how he's selling this chip-chopped ham on Sundays. Now, he supplemented the chip-chopped ham with, get this, it's a no-brainer, fresh, warm, baked bread from Holler's Eagle Bakery, located about a dozen blocks away from the store, with French stick baguettes. You could get 8 French sticks to a flat box, and the box had indentations around it, so you could stack them without smashing them. And not only did he have the chip-chopped ham and the warm-baked bread, Bob would reward customers who purchased a half a pound or more of chipped ham with a free copy of the Pittsburgh Press, which retailed for 15 cents. Before long, Bob's Sunday business was turning over nearly 500 pounds of chipped ham, 600 copies of the Pittsburgh Press, and 1,000 French baguette sticks. Bob wanted to succeed so bad with his dairy store that he would stroll into the A&P on a Sunday and buy all the store's bread and restock his shelves. And then, needing bread for Sunday, A&P customers made their way to Bob's store. And he shifted the customers' buying habits in a way that brought them into his store. He'd also buy out all of A&P's Sunday's stock of the Pittsburgh Press. So he'd buy all their bread and he'd buy all their newspapers, and he'd be like, hey, come on over to my store. I've got all that. So Bob and his brother Steve, they would go watch the Pittsburgh Pirates. They would go down to Forbes Field down there in Pittsburgh. And Bob turned to him one time at a Pirates game, and he said, Steve, why don't you switch your major at Penn State University? Why don't you switch over to business? He was encouraging him to take business classes at Penn State at a Pirates game at Forbes Field down there in Pittsburgh.